to settle in and find the breath at one of the anchors. And that could be the warm or cool air of the nostrils, or perhaps the rise and fall of the chest, or rise and fall or in and out of the belly. Just using any of those and just getting a felt sense of the breathing at that anchor. And of course, eventually the mind will get distracted and move from that, and it's more important to come back with a kindness and a gentleness. Coming back is actually the moment of mindfulness if you're gone away. You may find it helpful to sustain a little concentration by counting breaths for a moment. And sort of breathing in and breathing out naturally. And breathing in, breathing out, counting 1. And counting up to 5 or 10 and back down. And then dropping and counting from there. In addition to or rather than the breath, you may be mindful of sensations in the body. So that could be directing attention to the feet, and noticing any warmth or dryness or coolness, or any sensations there. And doing the same thing with the hands. Or in fact, allowing any sensations of the body to be known, whether that's tingling or pulsating.
take a short break, 5 minutes, and I'll get started after that. How's that? How's the sound? Does it work? Okay. So my name is Devin. This is actually my first time here as part of SF Dharma Collective, and it's good to be back. It's been a while. It's the same and very different, of course. So a little bit about myself. I've lived here in the city and in the East Bay for 30 years. I'm actually moving, and next month I'll be moving to the East Coast for a couple of years. Yeah, New England. Go figure. I'm in the IMS, Insight Meditation Society teacher training program. I've been a practitioner for 21 years. I started, I like to tell people I started on a trip to Asia that I took to India and Thailand, practicing and with the great masters and everything. But in reality, I was partying with friends, and just there happened to be Buddhas and things going on. And so on the way back, I had a friend who OD'd, and it sort of like, it shifted my life. It changed my life. And so sort of, books and trinkets and things that I picked up while I was there, all of a sudden had a different sort of meaning, and sort of practice came out of there. It didn't stick at that time, and then I, of course, bottomed out somewhere else down the road, and that has seemed to stuck for the last 24 years or so. I'm a student of Joseph Goldstein, and Carol Wilson. Joseph is my main teacher, as is Carol Wilson. So I work with Andrea Fella as well. Larry Yang has been one of my teachers. I started out actually in the Thich Nhat Hanh community, as well as San Francisco Zen Center. I lived right around the corner and would go there to practice, but it was 5:30 in the morning in the middle of the week, and those guys are sitting facing the wall, and everybody's in black robes. It was a little jarring for me at that time. And so I practiced a little bit with the Thich Nhat Hanh community, and then the other part of my aversive personality came out because they had a tendency to sing songs with guitars and like hand gestures and stuff, and just like I would be practicing and then would just flip out and lose it. So eventually I came to Insight meditation via a Goenka retreat, and it just allowed me, actually the first time, to sort of settle my mind a bit. I actually was able to see the mind settle a little bit, and sort of the heart open up, and I've been sort of on that road, or on that path, ever since. I've taught at East Bay Meditation Center, at the old ATS, and teach around the country, nationally now. Most of actually the teaching that I do is on the East Coast, more so than here. Rarely am I able to teach here in the Bay Area. I haven't been around enough of late. Let's see, I'm done with teacher training in a couple of years. Most of what I will teach, or most of what I do, is on long retreat. So I teach a 3-month retreat, 6 weeks. I'll teach 6 weeks in the fall in 2019, and we'll join the teaching team in 2020, if I'm still alive, for 6 weeks then. I've spent now I've been saying forever 3 of the last 6 years, but it's been a couple of years since I've sat long retreat. But before then, I spent about 3 of 6 years on retreat, typically for 3 to 6 or 9 months at a time, and just sort of get right up to that edge of like just this side of psychosis, and then you come out of retreat and everything is good, and then you sort of go right into it and come back. It's worked out well, and I think part of that, actually, for me, doing a lot of those things, has to do with just my background in general, sort of particular traumas, ADHD, of which the HD part you'll probably really get to see in full effect tonight, happens. So long retreat has actually been quite wonderful for that. It takes a long time. I just need to be in a room with nothing and nobody for a very long time and completely flip out and melt down, and then things are okay for the most part, it seems like. Bathed in brilliant white light one day, and then the next day, completely and totally melting down and chasing it. But having bottomed out and having some pretty severe addiction problems, actually going to meditation, and I've mentioned this before, going to meditation retreat, those 3 of 6 years, it was study and exploration, but also when you have seemingly such an addictive personality, being able to chase particular mind states on retreat becomes a whole thing. It's like, okay, so I'm not getting high anymore, but I'm still getting high in a sense, that's how, and definitely now actually seeing the practice unfold in a much deeper way, that's not the case anymore. I'm not actually chasing states, and you just sort of realize you're in the flow of whatever is happening. And actually the best parts of the practice are when it's just seemingly going horrible in all sorts of places in your life, and you're actually able to respond to that, and that it's going horrible, and it's not going to last. And when things are great and wonderful, they're not going to last. And you see it in like the simple, really simple ways. I see it. I got a check in the mail a couple of days ago. I'd been in a pretty shitty mood for a couple of days around finances, right? Typically. Check comes in the mail. Like, I see the check, and all of a sudden it's like I'm like smiling, I'm happy, I'm kind of dancing around the house, and things are just absolutely incredible. And then I open the check, because I hadn't opened the check to this point. I'm telling people, I'm like holding the check on my head. It's $1,000, it's $5,000, whole thing. I open the check, and the check is actually for $1.52. They mistakenly had given me the wrong check, and so now I'm back down to just flipping out and pissed off. And who do I need to call? And they've got to fix this now. Do I have to drive out to Spirit Rock to actually get my money now? Like, all of these things are happening. And it's like that. It's like very, very much like that. So anyway, so you know how I operate. All that to say is that actually isn't what I was here to talk about tonight, but so it goes. So actually what I wanted to talk about was just some brief reflections, and actually open it more for question and answer and comments on Samvega. So I've run into something in the practice. I was asked to give a talk at Spirit Rock on Martin Luther King's holiday, of which I went to go and do it. And, so I had a chance to sort of go through some of his teachings and, the various things he's done, because I'm just used to hearing, right, at this point, the sound bites, right? It's been co-opted so much. It's just these big, obvious, I have a dream. Oh, that's all I could remember is, what are you going to do? I think I'll talk about I have a dream, like everybody else in every commercial that's there. So I dove in a little bit further into some of his teachings and found some pretty incredible radical things. And it had me thinking about the urgency of which we practice, or how we come to practice, and ran across what's called in Pali Samvega, or Samvega, actually, Samvega, and it's spiritual urgency. And it's the urgency, or essentially the feeling when the Buddha left his palace and found the heavenly messengers, where he finally discovered old age, sickness, and death. That feeling that he had in his body and the mental state that was happening, that was Samvega. It was this spiritual urgency, or actually courage, spiritual courage to you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You're done. Like Fannie Lou Hamer's of civil rights would always say, sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's where you are, and something needs to shift. And I could relate to that from being totally like bottomed out, made sense to me. And so it had me also thinking of, myself. So when did that sort of happen to me? I mentioned that having a friend OD, that was a time. But that was sort of before practice. I actually didn't have tools to work with around that. That was, just something that was incredibly moving and scared the hell out of me. So I sort of changed in that sense, but it wasn't until I actually found the practice that there was a sort of like real transformative change. And even just before that, my own bottoming out was just, whatever day I can't remember the earthquake in '89, running around the entire city. I think it was visiting sort of every fire or horrible thing that actually happening or was going on in the city. I went to visit that night because I was with a couple friends, and we had a police scanner. So we went from place to place with an 8-ball of cocaine, going from place to place. Where do we go now? Let's go to this place. It was a really cool adventure by 3 very insane people, like running around. And at some point, it just completely bottomed out by actually seeing a family in the marina that had lost their house and lost everything. And it was pretty like heavy devastation of someone that I actually physically saw was injured from there. And that was actually a turning point in realizing standing there watching this person, you're trying to actually have a conversation with them and not being able to feel my feet or be able to feel my face. It was, pretty out there. But of course, needing to finish the rest of the Coke because we'd spent money on it. So that had to happen. But eventually that bottoming out, that going home or that leaving then just sort of led me to something needs to shift. Something's got to change. I can't do this, and I had been up to that point was able to do it functional. I put the Coke in cigarettes and everybody at work smoked, and I would just get clove cigarettes and I would just smoke them with Coke sitting at my desk, literally in the financial district. It was a lot of fun at the time. And pretty warped. It was pretty warped and pretty twisted. But I actually feel like it's given me the foundation that I need to work with, and has allowed me to practice in a way and teach in a way that's been incredibly supportive for myself and hopefully for some others that I've worked with as well. Anyway, Samvega, or spiritual urgency, is referenced oftentimes in the suttas, in the commentaries, and there's a couple poems that I found in the Therigatha, and the Therigatha are the verses of the elder nuns, and these are stories of the awakening or the enlightenment of these nuns. And a dear friend, Maddie Weingast, has written a pretty radical translation of these, because most of those were done in some pretty Victorian English, and so he's updated, and it's a book that'll be published sometime next month, I believe. So this is one of them. And these are just essentially stories of urgency, where urgency kicks in. And this is by Suba, the goldsmith's daughter. They all told me, there's only one way to be truly safe. Get as much as you can and hold on tight. I grew up in a house of gold, so I ought to know. We don't take greed seriously enough. You see what it does to people, slowly, over time. It changes them. It takes over. Stop lying to yourself. No one is immune. You find yourself saying, I'll learn to be generous. I'll give it all away. First, I just need a little bit more. Don't wait until you die, my sisters. See a clenched fist for what it is. Not tomorrow, not in 20 years, but today, right now. I'm Suba, the goldsmith's daughter, eating whatever is offered, sleeping wherever I can. This is what freedom looks like. Not a bucket of coins buried out back. Like you, I spent a long time going back and forth, but eventually I had to stand up and say it out loud. I will not be owned. That's a sense of urgency right there. And this one is Puna. It's called Full. Fill yourself with the Dhamma. When you are as full as the full moon, burst open. Make the dark night shine. And these were ones where they're describing to other people their awakening, their enlightenment, or this sense of urgency that was catalyst for their awakening. Stare, pry, listen, eavesdrop, die knowing something. You are not long here. Actually, I should have told you, that's not a nun, that's Walker Evans. He's a photographer, late photographer. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. On this night, the days of our life are decreased by one. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken, take heed, do not squander your life. And that was written on the door of a Zen monastery that I had a chance to visit in India once, and I wrote it down. It was, for my personality, I actually found something like that to be helpful. It actually helped to sort of inspire this sense of urgency that's there. So from what I've seen, a sense of urgency or spiritual urgency has been something that is possible with continuous practice. And actually, whenever I give a talk, essentially it all boils down to faith and continuous practice, because actual continuous practice allows you to actually see the only 6 things that are ever happening our touch, taste, sense, all of those things at a much finer detail. Typically, we will come to a talk for some relief, listen to a meditation for some relief, or something like that. Totally fine, right? That's absolutely fine. It could be secular, it could be Buddhist, absolutely fine. But I think to really see the practice in its full bloom, you could read the Satipatthana or read, the four foundations or those things, but it's actually a roadmap. So actually practicing it, doing it, you're actually able to see it all come alive. And this sense of urgency seems like just, okay, so this is a concept. But if you were to really dive in, and so when I'm talking about continuous practice, continuous mindfulness, it's like, okay, so yeah, so you've had your half an hour sit for the day or something. But then there are other parts, the paramis, for instance, you could take one of them and just reflect on that at some point during the day, or the precepts themselves. You could actually, I typically do a precept practice of just saying the precepts in the morning right before I sit. And it's not anything that I don't think about them, like I'm not spending the entire day thinking about them, but I'm just saying them in the morning, just sort of dropping them in the mind stream. And at the end of the night, then I'll pick them up, I say them again. And you just sort of, there's a quick review of, so how did I do with that? And that sort of keeps it in mind, and that keeps the mind, or it gears or orients the mind towards, in general, the wholesome, or in general, freedom, rather than the agitation or this idea somehow that I have this aversive personality, which is there. It begins to tip the scale, right? So I get up in the morning and I can be pissy or whatever. I can have a cup of coffee and I'm fine. But I've noticed over the years that if I consistently am practicing the entire day, then there's been an incredible transformation that's happened. And it's totally possible to practice all day. We think of it again as sitting on the cushion. We've done our hour and we're done. But the stealth metta practice, which I've talked about when I've been here before, has been helpful for me with my personality, typically, of just judging everybody, not, silently sitting on BART, judging every single person that's there. I know their story, I know who they are, but when I'm in stealth metta practice of actually doing metta practice of wishing myself well or wishing them well, I don't have to get really elaborate with it or really cheesy with it or go on and on. It's just to actually see somebody and just wish them well for the day. That's it. But consistently. And you'll note, I actually encourage you to try it over the course of a week to see what that's like. It's fascinating by halfway through the day of what actually comes up for you, of what you're actually feeling. The sort of the sense of generosity that I began to have was pretty remarkable compared to what was going on before. So that metta practice of actually doing that. In the precepts I'd mentioned, so just also honing simple concentration skills has been helpful with that. Same thing. These are like daily life practice things you're actually able to do that then spark that sense of urgency and simple concentration skills, right? There are, you can go on concentration retreats. My partner's on one now for a month and go into deep jhana states, and it can be absolutely wonderful, but you can also do it here. Just simply being able to consistently stay with the breath, breathing in, breathing out, counting one, being able to count up to 10 and back down again over and over and over again is incredibly concentrated. The amount of concentration that can come from that, and I usually don't say this, but the productivity that can result from that. I don't like to say that because that's where everybody wants to go. It's like, how can I produce more? But it can be incredibly helpful. Just that simple counting, or with music, sitting it on. I was in one that I often use and was able to teach this to some guys in San Quentin a couple of weeks ago. I spent some time in San Quentin, and it's just listening to a piece of music. Doesn't matter what the music is. For them, it was a particular piece of jazz, Sonny Clark, cool strutting, post-bop, 1958, I believe, something. And it's just a piece of music. And so what you're concentrating on is, so we took the horn. So there's a sax, and all you're listening for, you've got the headphones on, it's just the music playing, it's up pretty loud, and you're just following the saxophone through the entire song. And you're doing that over and over again. Maybe you listen to the same song again, and you follow another horn or something else. And you can do that with any piece of music. You'll actually see. Try it out yourself. This is one of those things you don't have to believe it. Just check it out. That the levels of concentration that you're able to get to without having to microdose, without having to do this, without having to do that. Not that I'm saying any of those things are bad. That's what you're doing. Cool. Go for it. I'm just saying it's all available to us pretty easily and pretty simply. It's almost too simple, right? It's hiding out in plain sight. So we want to go to someone for them to tell us what to do consistently, or listen to, an app, or on and on. And all those things are helpful too. But there are like 1 or 2 or 3 things that you could do consistently right now, easily, that allow the mind to settle and allows the heart to open up. And when the mind actually settles and the heart actually opens up, then that sense of spiritual urgency, that samvega, just comes bursting out. It allows for some particular discernment to happen, and for an engagement, a particular engagement to happen. I mean, that's a great place. That's the place to make decisions from. That's the place to make decisions from there. You're in a pretty balanced place to do it from. And it's not like it's not a state that's going to last forever, but there's a nice window there. And it's a window that's easily accessible without paying whatever, $3,500 or $4,000 to go on a 6-week retreat, where you may or may not find it. And it's always said that you can't actually find these things at home because of the busyness that's all around us. And but you have to find ways to work around the busyness, or work with the busyness, to use the busyness to actually be able to find some concentration. Do it in a crowd. I mean, I often do it. I can get pretty claustrophobic, but sitting, standing downtown or walking downtown, I've often will go and do walking meditation there, and just sort of use my peripheral vision and pick out clothes or colors from different people, and I'm just sort of walking through. I'm sure some people probably see it and wonder, this dude's a little something's a little off here. I'm not walking particularly fast. I'm not walking slow either, but I'm able to focus my attention on a particular group of people, or maybe it's men, or maybe it's women, or whatever, and use that for concentration practice, or use that for a metta practice. Sometimes I've been out and about, and it's like whenever I see a kid who's with a parent and it's early in the morning, it's like I'm saying metta for that kid, because I know it's probably hell when parents are trying to get to work. They're probably a little short, and they've got this kid that they're trying to take to school. It's like easy metta. It's like low-hanging fruit. It's really all pretty simple to do. And I've consistently used those things to spark sort of this sense of inspiration. And it's worked well. And I think I'd started part of it with talking about some of the impetus for this coming from looking at some of the teachings of Dr. King. And what I had found with Dr. King, there was some, I was listening to a sermon. It was a sermon that he was doing just before the March at Selma, and he was explicitly talking about instilling this sense of courage in people. So he's telling them that they have the capacity, everybody has the capacity to die for their freedom, and everybody has the capacity to die with dignity, or have dignity in their practice, or in this resistance that they were doing. It's pretty intense, right? There are people that know that these are people that know they're about to go out and they're about to get attacked, and some of them may actually get killed. And here he is offering this, or trying to inspire them with this, which I found pretty fascinating. And so I was able to use this in a classroom. I also work with kids as well. And so I had a little bit of time with, I think there were third grade classroom, So I was telling them stories about Dr. King and about the civil rights movement. This was in lieu of mindfulness that I was supposed to be doing with them that day, because there were some days when they were just like not having it. We're not just you and the bell, not let's do something else. Can we watch a movie or anything else? So I decided I could turn this into a mindfulness exercise with them. So eventually I'm telling them stories of the civil rights movement and that sort of thing, and Dr. King. And we eventually get to this place where we're actually writing letters to Dr. King. They're pretty fired up now. Everybody's got this like, how do we change the world? How do we do this and that? You know, they're all pretty fired up. So they write these letters. So these are some of the things that came out of that, which I felt a nice sense of some of them, not all of them. I promise not to hate anybody, ever, 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 even the boys. I thought, she's got a sense of urgency going on there. She's up, and she's not making no guarantees. I know what sad, mad, and scared feel like. I don't know what hate feels like. And my mom says that if we can keep love in our hearts, we won't ever know what hate feels like. I'm black and I'm white, just like Obama. I go back and forth and all around with love for both. I remember that kid. He was a neat kid. I only hear good stuff about you, Dr. King. Did you talk to your kids about the right time to go to bed? Did you ever lose a lot against the big kids? So this was a kid who was concerned with himself more than some Vega, but it was a neat kid. This was actually a girl that came from Serbia. I heard about Dr. King even in my country. I think he's big everywhere. People want peace even when they don't know about it. This is another kid. Are you really a doctor? What kind? Doctor of love? If you were, then that's the kind of doctor I'd like to be, I want to be, plus a basketball player. So, so it's fascinating. So just from that, it's for me, it actually feels like cheating, because I sit there and take it all in, and it's like such a huge rush and just a sense of inspiration and sort of catalyst for my own practice. And it's fascinating to actually see what's going on with them. I mean, once we do this exercise and we sort of read through some of these things, then I can actually sound the bell with them, and they will, I mean, the extent of their meditation essentially is me sounding the bell and me just asking them, okay, so listen to this from the beginning of the sound of the bell all the way to the end of the sound of the bell. And if you can't hear anymore, raise your hand. But with that, they're actually willing to do it like over and over and over again. Or because this serves as a particular catalyst for urgency with the kids, are able to actually introduce metta practice for them. And it's fascinating because they haven't lived so many years on the planet, so they haven't built up. All of this armor isn't built up. So if you can actually have a child just sort of at this point that's pretty open and the sense of urgency is there, and then you introduce them to metta practice and you're able to walk them through it slowly, then they can get in touch with the pure feeling of metta at the heart, like pretty quickly. And then you ask them what's happening, and then they'll tell you. There's tingling in my feet. I mean, this feeling that people pay a lot of money for and do all sorts of things to fill a particular feeling, they're having it in buckets, and it's like radiating out of their bodies, and they're describing. Not every kid. I was a kid who probably wouldn't have happened for it. There were kids like me in my class, but there are other kids that just, I mean, they're feeling it in the heart, and I'm describing to them to what to do with that. These kids, I'm pretty sure this was third grade, so they were 9. Most of them were 8 and 9 years old, yeah. And the metta practice with them has been fantastic, and it's one and a couple of them since then, because it feels good, will ask to do it again. So I've had a few of them when the other kids go out for recess, sit in the classroom with me and do metta practice. And it's like incredible. And it's interesting because if I tell them a story or something that is particularly moving or stirring to the heart, then, right, it's just like a pilot light, essentially. And they're sort of stepping on the pilot light, and there's just sort of more and more happening. I could not say anything at all and have metta practice for them, and it's much harder to access. But if they're thinking about, oh, what Dr. King went through and what he did and what he means, or if I'm asking them, we do simply get gratitude practice. I'm talking to them about their parents, or about what they're grateful for. Then they remember things that their parent has done or someone has done for them, and that this sort of this sense of happiness is there. And again, that happiness lights that pilot light that's in here, and I just reinforce it with some of the other metta things, and it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So something, and I'm talking about it sort of in this individual way, but it works collectively as well. Ideally, I mean, given the times that we live in now, I mean, this if there, from my view, if there was a time when there was a need for a collective sense of urgency, this feels like it to me. And I'm sure at other generations, right, other people would say the same thing, but it feels that way to me, to actually take the simple practices and put them into place, right? We can make it complicated. We can make it really complicated. We could just listen to a Dharma talk. We could want a particular Dharma talk. We could want a particular teacher. We could need our malas and cushions and everything else. Or we could do the simple, basic, just simple, basic, which is really kindness. I mean, we're actually talking about kindness when it comes down to it. It's just trying to be kind to ourselves or trying to be kind to others, and the kindness comes into play initially in the meditation practice, right? When you come off the breath, which you're going to, then it's like coming back with the kindness. That actually allows the nervous system a little bit to settle in, and you keep going. I mean, we're going to screw it up time and time again, but that's just it. You're going to screw it up. It's not a big deal. There's nothing, you actually don't get to win the meditation race. Nobody wins the meditation race. So there are a couple, actually I won't read, there's a couple things from the suttas that are taken directly from the suttas about instilling a sense of urgency, but basically, I'll give you the paraphrase. Monks and nuns would go to the woods or be in different places in the woods, stressing out about any number of things. A deva would show up and let them know that they're stressing out about these things, and they would come to their senses and be instilled with a sense of urgency, which then led to their enlightenment. All wrapped up in a neat, tidy bow. Easy enough. And it's not always like that. We know, obviously, it's not. That's not how it's going to be. It takes, again, the consistency of practice to be able to do it, to actually doing the practice, right? It's a concept. I mean, but I think oftentimes it feels like we want to just know it intellectually, or play with the concepts back and forth, or read. I mean, I was an armchair Buddhist. I read all sorts of books. I read them forwards and backwards all the time. But until you actually sit down and do the practice, that's when it unfolds. That's when it actually unfolds, and it doesn't become a conceptual thing. And that's when I feel like I feel and see the genius and the brilliance of the Buddha and these teachings that are 2,600 years old, is that you can actually work with them. Eventually starting with the felt sense of the breath and going from there. So some curious thoughts on things that may have been motivating factors in your own practice, and how they've changed now that you've maybe been practicing for any number of months or any number of years, or questions or comments or about any of it, or even your own meditation practice.
Why is concentration practice
Well, how does it? Hmm. Why is it? Well, Matt, so my experience with actually feeling like the heart's been open has happened a couple different ways. One, well, let's say metta practice. So I've done metta as a concentration practice, and the heart is eventually open it up. And I've done metta as a heart practice through the Brahma Viharas, and it opens up. They're similar sort of things. It's concentration practice, right? Your mind is sustained on a particular object for a while, and at some point in time you become, in a sense, one with that object. And when there's that sense that you're intimate with the object, this, then oftentimes the edges of the body may seem to be gone, or it may the idea that you're sitting there talking and I'm here and everybody else is around, that may be gone. It may sound like a voice is just here, and there's something in there, unless you get scared, which then if you get scared and you're fearful, it takes you out of the concentration. The concentration's gone. But if you're not and you're able to settle, then just that settling, I believe, allows you to see that there's something other than you that's here. And there's something that's actually quite soothing about that, and it just allows the heart to open up. It's one theory. It could be a total bullshit. I don't know. It's possible. Yeah. No, it's absolutely, yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. And I know lots of, I have lots of folks, colleagues that, tend towards the Brahma Viharas or heart practices, or tend towards concentration practices. And for me, both, I end up getting the effects of either doing either practice. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It can be, like I said, you can get to that point, and if fear arises, then it wipes it all away, because you're freaked out by the emptiness, you're freaked out by the spaciousness. If not, if there's a surrender and there's not a grabbing hold of like, oh, this feels good, I want more, which kills it also. If there's just the surrender and you're just able to be there with it, then the heart opens. Yeah. Comments? Concerns? Yeah, it's fantastic. What's the book is, I believe, and I think this is a working title, unless the editors may change the title. It is, and the guy's name is Maddie Weingast, and it will be called "The First Free Woman: Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns." That's the working title. So, and I think the book is due to be published sometime next month or so. It's gone. Yeah. Yeah. It depends. Some of it can be why I would take probably the tips that I enjoy, not knowing what it is that you do, but in general, Sayadaw U Tejaniya, and I actually didn't mention this before, is just knowing that actually having some sort of formal sense of doing any sort of mindfulness practice is really hard to do, or you're not able to do both. So then what you're doing then is you're noticing, so what's the attitude of my mind right now? So whatever meeting you're in or whatever conversation you're in, the mind can handle that. What's the attitude of the mind right now? You're not mulling it over. You're just, so what's the attitude of the mind right now? So the conversation could be something that's in your favor, incredible, that's going to happen at work. And so you know that there's some joy there's some happiness. It's naming that. Or the opposite, or whatever the particular emotion or feeling is. So always keeping that in mind, that inquiry, that mental inquiry, keeping that in mind throughout the day is a great way to do it. And the same thing, or asking, so what's obvious in my experience right now? What's obvious in the experience right now? I'm holding my coffee cup. I'm sitting in my office. This dude that I cannot stand is about to walk through the door, right? But in a very matter-of-fact way. You're not saying this motherfucker, you're not going through all of that. It's just factual, this is happening. So just that allows there to be some space. There's a particular sense of being controlled and being run around that isn't there if you're able to do that consistently. Just know what's happening while it's happening. It's not like the ideal, the perfect thing, but it's a place to start. And I've often seen then from that starting place, being able to have a little bit of mindfulness in a particular workplace or situation that's difficult. It may not be, something that's easy to do, but some of those simple inquiries can be helpful. What's the attitude of the mind? What's the attitude of the mind right now? Sort of like, what's the flavor of the mind? Yeah. And it's actually most important to not, you're not diving in full on, having a full on conversation, mental conversation at all. It's just like dropping a pebble in, and it does its own ripple. It does its own work. Yeah. It's immediately going to cut through. I mean, particularly if you're have a bad mood, attitude, or whatever going on, it's immediately going to cut through that. You can't say that and still be pissy. I challenge you to actually say that and still be pissy in that moment, because it's, wow, I'm really feeling pissy. That begins to be known, and just that cuts through. Does that make sense? Or try it. Yeah, try it, yeah. You're welcome. Anybody else? Yeah, well, the word urgency probably, could be there. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Well, the sense of spiritual urgency, actually, it's more, you're sitting, and because there's some settledness, or maybe there's some particular insights that have come up, the sense of urgency arises from you. It's not anything that we're actually looking for, that you're actually looking for. So like when the Buddha left the palace, he wasn't looking for any of this. He saw all of these things, and that sparked within him, how do I change this? Looking for the root of suffering. But it's not in a place of panic, or it's not in a place of anxiety. And actually, if you are in a place of panic or are in a place of anxiety with that, then obviously the instruction is just to notice or note this anxiety or panic that's there.
So the urgency is more of a, I've noticed this thing now, and now I'm going to either tend to it, or I'm going to pay attention to it.
Exactly.
Away from it.
Exactly. It's asking us to not look away. It's asking us to be there. And sometimes that can come just from the practice of right, where we could, I think there are like plenty of people that are in a place to dive further into the practice, but they just want a little bit of relief. They just want to feel okay. But their minds, they're actually a little bit concentrated, probably regularly, and probably sit regularly, and they just sort of stay right there, sort of stay in that place. And there's a little bit of agitation, and oftentimes it's actually not agitation, that's an urgency, a calling to go further or to go deeper. And sometimes the flip side can happen, right? There's a sense of urgency, and then we turn around. There's a phrase, I forget the Pali, but the phrase essentially is like nostalgia for samsara, where you just turn around, do the opposite. which is a phenomenon at times that happens for people on retreat or long retreat. You can be on retreat for 3 months and have all sorts of things that happen, right? And then the number of people that, I've gotten phone calls from totally freaked out because they're sitting at the airport bar and they're like eating a giant lobster roll and drinking shots. They've had like 3 months silent. And this is just this freak out. I mean, it's a complete and total like freak out. The moment the mind has it's buying into it. And so the sense of urgency is asking you to not buy into that. But
I also see it as when I sit that like in the evening, I sit in the morning super
Mhm.
like I'm really like definitely sit in the morning. And when the morning comes, I'm like, that's not so important right now. So developing an urgency, to like really make it important is that also part of this, or am I just reading? Am I just
it can be. You know what? If the morning sit feels important and urgent, allow it to be there. But I always encourage people to add in other things so it's not this practice in life or sitting and not sitting. Is that the sitting happens too, but there's like 5 minutes of stealth metta that's here. There's 5 minutes of mudita practice of just like finding some spark of joy in something else. There's reflecting on the suttas or walking meditation. Those are things I also encourage because it sort of spreads things out and makes it less likely to have this really unimportant sit the day. And sometimes if it's unimportant, it's good just to sit with that. I mean, I sit and similar to you. So I roll out of bed and I sit. Otherwise it takes me a long time to actually make it happen or get it going. And that's been consistent over my life. But I also too, because I'm teaching most of the time, have a chance to sit in the middle of the afternoon and have a chance to sit in the evening. And oftentimes in the evening, that's just a sleepy sit. And so I've stopped, like there's no fighting or no resistance. I just lay down wherever I am and I may count breaths or I may say, wow, I'm falling asleep now. I'm falling asleep now. I think I'm going to fall asleep. I mean, literally, that's what I'm doing. Or you hold your arm up at a 90-degree angle, right? As soon as you actually fall asleep, your arm's going to fall down. You just allow it to happen. Just make it work. Make it work for you. That it might be okay to just lay down at that time and or just say, I'm bored. This is boring. I mean, it's going to change, right? If you do that, it's not going to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that, and I don't think there's probably, yeah. That's why I meditate. For all of those things that you mentioned are that there. But what happens? So the reason that I'm sitting here, the reason I'm interested in sharing the Dharma, the reason that I've spent the time I have on retreat is that somewhere along the way I really actually felt like I tasted that relief and a little sense of peace, a little sense of freedom, and I became interested. Where does this come from? And so diving into that, and I have I've been trained in MBSR, but I'm actually not interested in doing it in a secular way. I'm interested in the cultural context. Not everybody is. I'm interested. I don't mind. I was working with someone recently at Spirit Rock, and we were doing the refuges and precepts, and she asked me to not do them because she said they were too Buddhisty. And I was like, there's a Buddha behind me. We're in a Buddhist meditation center. What are you talking about? She's going to hear this on the live stream. This always happens to me.
So you're saying you became more interested in
Where these states came from? Yes. Yes, it gave me the craving. It allowed me to dive deeper into the Dharma, into the Buddhist teachings, into Buddhist psychology, into the Buddhist cosmology, more so than sort of stripping it away of of the cultural trappings, and that's fine, right? I mean, that's I came out of learning, in BSR at a hospital and teaching it to teens and that sort of thing, and that's fantastic and needed, and I think it's needed in the workplace. I feel that when I'm teaching in those settings or folks that come from those settings, I'm always wanting to guide them, and it's just my thing, to the Dharma, to the Buddhist teachings, because I just think it's incredible to have teachings this old that there's some really simple instructions that actually, if you just allow them to be, then the way the practice unfolds and plays out is pretty incredible. So. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on one hand, I think that's all you can do. I have two daughters. Neither of them meditate. They don't want to hear anything about my meditation or what we do. I mean, my daughter's 25. She lives here in the city. She's never seen me give a Dharma talk. She if she came, she would just think he's full of shit. That's what she would say. It would just be like so hypocritical. So hypocritical. Yeah, calm, meditate. Yeah, right. That's... I'm dad, like, right. That's the role that I have there, and I'm a divorced parent, so that's another role. It's interesting. I taught teen retreats and kids Buddhist meditation classes and things. My daughters were never in any of those. They weren't involved. They weren't involved in any of those things.
My 5-year-old kind of is interested.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there are. They're actually. I can find some resource for you. There are tons of resources for kids, for sure. Some of it, literally with the kids that I worked with, and we've got to wrap up here, with kids have just been, literally it's been sounding the bell. Just letting them hear the bell. That's it. Some of it is just sitting on the carpet, rolling around on the carpet, and it's just, I'm talking to them. They're very specific targeted words around kindness and around love and around being friends, but they're really simple, basic things. Whatever game that I play with them, it's about, I play a very specific role in that game to sort of create the causes and conditions for some mindfulness or some reflection. Yeah, self-reflection. Yeah, there are things to do, but if I was like forcing it on him, making them do it, there's no way. I had a small dose of that, and it's like my daughter will just if she ever meditates again, I'll be lucky. Yeah, because I really wanted her to do this thing. I have the answer. I have the key, right? And can you imagine, right? Your folks tell you that? Come on. Yeah, my oldest is 25, and my youngest is 16. No, she's not. My 16-year-old isn't interested in even talking to me. I'm a divorced parent. So this is like another area of practice. She's 16. She lives in Boulder. She's there with her mom. Her contact with me is very limited. When I do, there's a little bit of contact, and she's like, oh, so you're doing meditation retreats again. Yeah. That's the extent of the conversation. So then I'm practicing with that, right? It's hard. But yeah, my oldest, she works for a tech firm, venture capitalist. So she's interested, but she's interested in it for productivity's sake. How's this going to make us some money? Her boyfriend's a medical sales rep. Sorry if anyone's a medical sales rep in here. Sorry, I appreciate it about that. They're doing their thing. They're doing their thing. Sorry, I've kept us way over. Yes, please. I'm sorry. I'm behind.
Bay Area Tara on Mandala is Sangha. supporting itself on a dime. So we've been doing that. It's happening, and your continued support is necessary and welcome. And I think the suggested amount is $20. And of course, if you have $5, you can give happily. I think the key thing is happily. If you can give it happily, please do give it. If for some reason you can't happily be here with us, and if you want to just drop $100 in there because that makes you happy, right on. Thank you.
Lots of forms of payment.
Yes, we do. PayPal, credit cards.
Venmo. Awesome.
Cash is king.
Awesome. Now, with a sense of urgency, I'm going to sound this bell here. May the merits of this practice benefit all beings and bring peace. Thank you all very much for experiencing the